So if the core of the team is flawed and they keep going back to this same thing, as you said, they blew themselves up in the Diamondback series, and we saw what happened against the Mets. So you come back with the same core. I mean, like I think a big problem is the complementary players not producing. But you're right, the rest of this team is the rest of this team, and it's difficult to change. So do you think they run it back this year, or does Dave Dombrowski realize, hey, I can't move on from the core of this team, but I can change some of the complementary players, Bohm, Stott, Marsh, etc.
Yeah, I last year that was kind of the theme, they're running it back. I don't get the impression that this is going to be a run back. I know Dave wasn't really illuminating in what his offseason strategy will be and what changes he will make, but I get the impression he is going to make changes. Kind of when you parse his comments from yesterday, he made a comment, sometimes you trade good players for good players. I thought that was illuminating. Calling his guys good players helps their trade value, or at least builds them up a little bit, pumps them up a little bit. So I could see him trading from his everyday nine, his core of everyday nine. There are some guys you're just not going to trade, like Harper. There are some guys that are going to be impossible to trade, like Turner. But there are guys that I think they will consider and maybe have to get creative, maybe have to eat a little salary. But I would be shy. Maybe it's a younger ascending player like a Bohm, who I think has value, who personally I hope they don't make a hasty decision on based upon his poor finish and his frustration. I think there's a lot there. I think he's a good player. I think you can help him get over some of his frustrations and get more out of him next year, and at least ride him closer to free agency when Aiden Miller is ready. But you never know. Maybe a Stott, maybe a Bohm, maybe it's a more high-priced guy. They eat something. I just think he's going to make some deals because, like you mentioned, complementary players are so important. And I think he's going to tweak around the edges where he can, where there's flexibility. There's not a lot of flexibility with their big core. There is some flexibility around the edges. I'd be surprised if we see the same team in Clearwater. I just think they're going to make some tweaks. They're going to run it back in certain areas, coaching staff, manager. But if things aren't firing, mid-season next year, all of a sudden they could start bearing down on those areas. I just believe this guy's going to make changes. I'm not sure what they are. I think he's going to try to help that approach and get some a grinder hitter, maybe in the outfield, center field, left field, so they can eliminate the chances of these droughts. I think it's important they make some changes. And if I think it's important, I'm sure a Hall of Fame caliber GM like Dave Dombrowski thinks it's important, and the organization shares all those views.
Yeah, I didn't think Dave Dombrowski was going to run it back. It's also like you just kind of went through, like a high price player. Would you include money? I think you're talking about Nick Castellanos. They tried to move him last year. He also was, he was also very, very good this year too. You have to replace what he does, his production. Stott, I like Stott. So is he the guy that you move on from? Alec Bohm's a top 5 pick, and he was just an all-star. But does that help change I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. Like you had just ended. You're not sure what they do. I'm not sure what they do either. But I think we agree something needs to be done to change something. Coming back with the same lineup's not going to work.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they have a clear-cut answer or solution yet. The offseason has arrived for the Phillies. It hasn't arrived for the rest of for a lot of baseball. And these conversations, every team around baseball is having them. Like, okay, who might we move on from? Who's going to help inch us forward in this area? Teams are starting to just formulate their off-season plans. And I don't think the Phillies know until you get deep in conversation with other teams. Who's available? How will that guy fit with us? Do we want to move on from this good player to get this good player? This stuff is all kind of a blank slate in front of us. But, like I said, I just see this guy. I don't see him standing firm here. I just don't see him standing firm here. I think there's going to be some changes, and I think they are warranted. And if you have to move on from a guy you like, a guy who had a good year, you might have to do it to move this thing forward. So we'll see.